It's strange, isn't it? How we spend our whole lives believing we're the ones steering the ship, making choices, setting goals, shaping our destiny. And then, one day, something cracks, and you realize you've been following a script you didn't even know existed. I don't mean fate or some cosmic plan. I mean something quieter, deeper, like a law buried inside you that dictates what you fear, what you chase, what you believe you deserve. You can't see it, but it's there, pulling strings behind your thoughts. You think you're free, but you're not. Not yet. Maybe you felt it too. That invisible resistance when you try to change, that unseen barrier that stops you right before something real could happen. You tell yourself it's bad luck or timing or someone else's fault. But deep down, there's this nagging feeling that the obstacle isn't out there. It's in here, somewhere inside you, and the more you try to ignore it, the tighter it grips you. I remember the first time I really saw it. I was sitting alone, staring at a decision I should have made months before, one that could have changed everything for me, but I couldn't move. My mind was full of reasons. Too risky, too late, too uncertain. Yet beneath all those excuses was something darker. Fear, not of failure, but of what success might reveal about me, of what I'd have to face if things actually went right. And then it hit me. I wasn't avoiding the world. I was avoiding myself. It's unsettling to realize that the person you thought you were, the one who plans, dreams, decides, might just be a mask, a part of you trained to play by rules you never agreed to. From childhood, you're told what's good and bad, what's acceptable, what's shameful. You adapt. You survive by fitting in. But the price is high. You start editing yourself, erasing the parts that don't match the picture others expect. At first, it feels like growing up. Later, it feels like disappearing. We bury those pieces, the anger, the envy, the wild desires, believing that if we hide them deep enough, they'll die. But they don't. They sink into the unconscious. And from there, they whisper. They guide your choices, shape your relationships, sabotage your efforts, all while pretending to be your logic or intuition. And because you can't see them, you assume you're in control. That's the cruel joke of it. The tighter you cling to control, the less of it you actually have. Sometimes I think of it like a shadow following us everywhere. You can't run from it. You can't fight it because it's not outside you. It is you, the side that society told you to reject, the part you learned to call wrong. But here's the thing, the shadow doesn't vanish just because you refuse to look. It waits, patiently, and when you least expect it, it shows up. In the people who irritate you for no reason, in the fears that make no sense, in the dreams you abandon halfway. It's there, trying to get your attention. What scares me most isn't the shadow itself. It's how invisible it can become when you refuse to see it. You start to build a whole life on top of avoidance. The right job, the right relationship, the right beliefs, and still, something inside feels hollow. You tell yourself you should be happy, that everything looks fine on paper, but the feeling doesn't go away. Because no matter how beautiful the mask, it can't breathe for you. It can't feel for you. It can't set you free. Sometimes I wonder if that's what Carl Jung meant when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Maybe all of us are walking around, mistaking our programming for destiny. Maybe every "why does this keep happening to me" is just our shadow trying to be seen, not to punish us, but to wake us up. I think awakening begins the moment you stop running, when you finally admit that something inside you feels off. Not broken, just unseen. It's terrifying because it means stepping into the unknown, dismantling the story you've lived by. But it's also the beginning of real freedom. You can't change what you refuse to face. You can't heal what you pretend doesn't exist. So maybe the first act of courage isn't changing your life, but looking at it honestly, seeing where you've been driven by fear instead of love, by survival instead of truth. Recognizing that the invisible law running your life was never imposed from outside. It was written inside you long ago when you were too young to question it. And maybe now, for the first time, you're ready to rewrite it. That's the forbidden law, you know. Not to challenge your own shadow, because once you do, everything changes. You stop being a prisoner of what you don't understand. You begin to live as if your choices actually belong to you. But there's a cost. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending the walls aren't there. And maybe that's the point. Have you ever wondered where all those hidden parts of you go, and the moments when you swallowed your anger instead of speaking, when you smiled to seem agreeable while something inside screamed no? They don't disappear. They sink. They settle somewhere beneath your awareness, forming a kind of underground world inside you, a place made of everything you weren't allowed to be. That's where the shadow is born. When we were kids, the world taught us what was acceptable. Don't cry, don't shout, don't want too much, don't take up space. We learned which emotions made people love us and which made them turn away. Little by little, we carved ourselves into something manageable. We learned to survive by hiding our rawness, our contradictions, our hunger to be whole. But nothing truly buried ever dies. It just waits. The shadow starts quietly. You notice it in the tension behind your politeness, in the exhaustion that follows constant self-control. You feel it in the envy that surprises you, in the judgment you pass on others but secretly aim at yourself. You tell yourself you're fine, but your body knows better. The shoulders tighten, the breath shortens, the nights stretch long and restless. Something inside is asking to be seen. I used to think the shadow was evil, a dark corner of my soul best left alone. But now I see it differently. It's not evil. It's exiled. It's every emotion I wasn't allowed to feel, every impulse I had to shame, every truth I thought would cost me love. The shadow isn't trying to destroy me. It's trying to return to me, and it does so the only way it can, by breaking through the cracks of my perfect life. Think about how often we repeat the same painful patterns, the same arguments, the same mistakes, the same disappointments, as if we're trapped in some invisible loop. That's not coincidence. That's the shadow at work, replaying what was never resolved. It keeps showing up until you stop running and finally listen. Every heartbreak, every failure, every outburst you regret, they're not random punishments. They're messages from the parts of you you've disowned. The irony is that the more we reject our shadow, the more power it gains. You can dress it up as logic or spirituality or self-discipline, but the truth always leaks through. You might find yourself drawn to people who embody the very qualities you repress. You might resent them for it. You might even fall in love with them, because in some strange way they remind you of yourself, the version you locked away. You see it everywhere once you start looking. The confident woman who secretly feels worthless, the gentleman who carries an ocean of anger, the perfectionist whose control hides deep chaos, the healer who can't face their own wounds. We all wear disguises built to protect us from rejection, but the price of protection is disconnection from others and from ourselves. Sometimes I wonder if the shadow is just our longing to be whole. It doesn't care about morality or image. It only wants acknowledgement. It wants to breathe. And yet, we're terrified of it, because to face it means to admit that we're not as good, as pure, as righteous as we pretend to be. It means surrendering the idea that we're only the light. But what if the light has no meaning without the dark? What if the shadow is not the enemy, but the missing half of the story? I think that's why people stay asleep, not because they're blind, but because they're afraid of what they'll see when the lights turn on. It's easier to chase distractions than to meet yourself without filters. But one day something happens. A heartbreak, a loss, an emptiness that no achievement can fill. And suddenly the walls crumble. You see the cracks in your carefully built identity. And through those cracks, the shadow begins to speak. When that moment comes, it feels like everything you knew about yourself starts to unravel. But maybe that's not destruction. Maybe it's truth reclaiming its space. The parts of you that were cast away are finding their way home. And it hurts. God, it hurts. But in that pain is a kind of purity. It's the ache of becoming real. So if you've ever felt like you're carrying a weight you can't name, or like there's a war inside you that no one else can see, you're not broken. You're waking up. The shadow you've been running from isn't your downfall, it's your doorway. It took me a long time to understand how the world mirrors us back to ourselves. At first, I thought people simply irritated me because of who they were, their arrogance, their carelessness, their pride. But then I started noticing something unsettling. The things that triggered me most in others were strangely familiar. It was as if life kept holding up a mirror, forcing me to look at something I didn't want to see. We think we're reacting to the world, but most of the time we're reacting to ourselves. When you feel a sudden flash of judgment, when someone's freedom makes you uncomfortable, when someone's confidence feels offensive, that's not about them. That's your shadow reaching through another person, trying to show you what you've buried. It's like your soul has found a clever way to speak to you, using the faces of others. It's humbling, really. You start realizing that what you despise in people is often what you repress in yourself. You see a person who's loud and it bothers you, but maybe it's because you learned to stay quiet to be accepted. You envy someone's courage because it reminds you of how often you've played it safe. You scorn someone's vanity, yet secretly crave to be seen. Every irritation, every judgment, every spark of envy, they're not random. They're reflections. For me, it was control. I used to be so frustrated by people who were unpredictable or messy, people who didn't plan, who just followed their feelings. I told myself they were irresponsible. But beneath that judgment was something else. Jealousy. They moved freely while I lived in constant restraint. They acted while I overthought. And deep down, there was a part of me that longed for that same freedom. I just didn't know how to admit it. That's the strange beauty of projection. It gives you back the parts of yourself you've exiled. But it doesn't come gently. It arrives as discomfort, as anger, as judgment. It demands your honesty. You can either keep blaming others, or you can stop and ask, what is this showing me about me? That single question changes everything. Suddenly the world stops being your enemy and becomes your teacher. It's not easy, though. Facing your projections feels like swallowing fire. You have to look at qualities you've spent a lifetime denying. You have to see your own arrogance, your own jealousy, your own hypocrisy, not as sins, but as truths. And you have to hold them with compassion. That's the hard part, because the moment you stop judging others, you start seeing how harshly you've judged yourself. Sometimes I think the people who challenge us most are gifts in disguise. They awaken what we've tried hardest to forget. The ones who hurt us, who frustrate us, who make us feel small. They pull our shadows into the light. They don't do it kindly, but they do it effectively. They show us where we're still asleep, where we're still pretending. The question is whether we'll keep defending our illusion or dare to wake up. It's a strange thing watching yourself project. You start catching it mid-thought, realizing your anger is more about your reflection than the other person. It's not about blaming yourself. It's about understanding yourself. That's what Jung meant when he said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The world is a mirror. And we spend years mistaking the image for reality. The deeper I looked, the more I saw that projection wasn't just a psychological mechanism. It was a language. My soul speaking to me through symbols. Every person who crossed my path carried a message. Some showed me my strength, others my weakness. Some mirrored my light, others my darkness. Together they painted a picture of who I really was, far more complex and contradictory than I'd ever dared to admit. And maybe that's the point. We spend so much time polishing our image, trying to appear good, when what we really crave is wholeness. But wholeness doesn't come from perfection. It comes from integration, from being able to look at the person you've projected onto others and whisper, "You're in me too." That's where freedom begins, not in changing others, but in recognizing yourself everywhere you look. The world won't stop reflecting you. Every encounter, every irritation, every act of love or rejection, it all loops back to the same place, your own consciousness. And once you see that, truly see it, the walls between you and everyone else start to dissolve. You stop fighting the mirror. You start listening to it. Because you finally understand that what you've been seeing in others has always been the story of you. There's a certain point when all the theories and insights stop feeling abstract and start feeling painfully real. It's when you begin to notice that your life, the patterns, the heartbreaks, the fears, isn't random at all. It's orchestrated by something within you that you've never met directly. The shadow doesn't just live in your thoughts. It lives in your choices. It hides in your habits, whispers in your fears, and quietly shapes the story you call your life. I used to think bad luck was the reason I kept ending up in the same emotional places, the same arguments, the same disappointments, the same quiet emptiness. But one day it hit me. The common denominator was me. Not in a self-blaming way, but in an awakening way. It wasn't that the world was against me. It was that some part of me was recreating familiar pain over and over because it didn't know how to exist without it. That's the cruel genius of the shadow. It repeats what it knows, even if it hurts. The child who felt unseen grows into an adult who keeps finding people who can't truly see them. The one who was taught that success means danger will unconsciously sabotage every victory. The person who learned that love comes with rejection will keep choosing those who can't stay. It's not madness, it's memory, emotional memory written deep in the psyche. The shadow plays its script until you notice it. I once knew a man who lost everything, 3 businesses, countless relationships, every chance at stability. He wasn't lazy, he wasn't foolish. In fact, he was brilliant. But every time he got close to real success, something in him panicked. He'd make reckless decisions, push away partners, destroy everything he'd built. Later, through therapy, he discovered a belief buried so deep he didn't know it existed. That wealth was shameful. That power made you unworthy of love. His father had taught him that when he was just a boy. That belief became law, and that law became fate. That story stuck with me because it made me realize how our shadows disguise themselves as destiny. We don't even see it happening. We say things like, "I guess that's just how I am," or "This always happens to me." But behind those words hides something much bigger, a silent loyalty to an old wound. It's almost as if a part of us refuses to move on, clinging to the pain because at least it's familiar, at least it's safe. And yet, the more we refuse to look, the louder the shadow becomes. It starts leaking into the body, tension, anxiety, insomnia. It starts showing up in relationships, defensiveness, control, withdrawal. The mind can lie, but the body never does. Your body knows when you're avoiding truth. It knows when you're betraying yourself. Every headache, every tight chest, every restless night might be your shadow asking to be acknowledged. I've come to believe that every breakdown is really a breakthrough in disguise. The moment when the shadow grows too loud to ignore. It's terrifying when it happens. You feel like you're losing control. But maybe that's the whole point. You're losing control of the illusion. The version of you that was built on suppression and denial begins to collapse. And beneath the ruins, something real starts to breathe again. You realize that the world isn't punishing you. It's reflecting you. Life keeps handing you the same lesson until you learn it. That's not cruelty. That's mercy in disguise. Because the universe, or whatever you want to call it, wants one thing for you: wholeness. And wholeness can't exist while parts of you are still hiding in the dark. It's a strange relief once you see it. You stop asking, why does this keep happening to me? And start asking, what is this trying to show me? And the answer always comes, not in words, but in shifts. You start feeling lighter. You start choosing differently. The people who once triggered you no longer hold the same power. The fears that used to paralyze you begin to dissolve. You stop fighting the shadow because you realize it was never your enemy. It was your teacher. Maybe this is what Jung meant when he said, "What we do not bring to consciousness appears in our lives as fate." The shadow doesn't punish you. It fulfills your unconscious instructions. But once you see it, once you bring it into the light of awareness, the spell breaks. You're no longer the puppet. You become the author. And that's when life begins to change. Not because the world suddenly becomes easier, but because you do. There comes a moment when you can't run anymore. You've tried to stay busy, to stay distracted, to keep up the appearance of control. But the inner noise grows too loud. It's like your own soul starts cornering you, forcing you to turn around and face what you've spent your whole life avoiding. That's the breaking point. The moment the mask begins to crack. It's terrifying, that first real encounter with your shadow. Not because it's monstrous, but because it's familiar. You look into it and realize it's you. The parts you abandoned, the emotions you silenced, the truths you couldn't live with. You see your jealousy, your pride, your rage, your loneliness. You see how much of your life was built on pretending those things weren't there. And for a second, it feels like you might drown in it. I remember sitting in that darkness once, not metaphorically, but literally. One night, I turned off every light in the room, sat on the floor, and decided I wasn't going to move until I faced what was really there. No music, no distractions, no comforting words, just me and that heavy silence. At first, my mind fought back. It replayed excuses, defenses, stories. But then slowly, they started to crumble. What remained was raw emotion, shame, anger, grief, and beneath all that, something else: relief. Because for the first time, I wasn't hiding. That's the strange paradox. What you fear facing is never as dangerous as the fear itself. The darkness inside you isn't out to destroy you. It's trying to be seen. It's been waiting for acknowledgement. And the moment you stop resisting, something begins to shift. The storm doesn't vanish, but it stops feeling like an enemy. You begin to realize that the pain was never punishment. It was communication. We all carry this deep misconception that to be good, we must be spotless, that light and darkness can't coexist. But life isn't a war between the two, it's a dance. Every emotion you reject becomes a ghost that haunts you. Every truth you deny becomes a chain around your freedom. When you finally allow yourself to feel everything, not just the noble emotions, but the ugly ones too, you start becoming whole again. That's the secret no one tells you. The parts of you that scare you the most are also the ones holding your greatest strength. Your anger hides your passion. Your envy hides your desire. Your fear hides your longing for growth. Every shadow emotion carries energy, powerful, creative energy, that's been locked away because someone once told you it was wrong. But what if it was never wrong, just misunderstood? It's strange how liberation often starts with surrender, not the passive kind, but the brave kind, the one that says, "I'm done pretending." You stop fighting yourself. You let the tears come. You admit the things you swore you'd never say aloud. You face the parts that disgust you, the impulses that frighten you, and you realize they're not trying to ruin you. They're trying to return you to yourself. When I talk to people about this, they often ask, "But what if I lose myself in it? What if the darkness consumes me?" And I always tell them, it won't. You've already survived by denying it. Facing it won't kill you. It will free you. The only thing that dies in that process is the illusion, the false self that was built to please, to impress, to belong. And once that falls away, something real finally emerges. You start seeing the beauty in your imperfections. You stop measuring your worth by how light you are and start honoring the complexity that makes you human. You learn that courage isn't about defeating the shadow, but about loving yourself even while standing inside it. Maybe this is what awakening really is. Not some mystical revelation, but the quiet, trembling acceptance that you are both the darkness and the dawn, that you can hold both without collapsing, that you can walk through the fire of your truth and come out cleaner, softer, more alive. It's not an easy journey. You'll cry, you'll rage, you'll doubt yourself. But something sacred happens in that breaking. Every piece that falls apart is a piece that no longer fits the lie you were living, and slowly what's left is real, raw, honest, you. There's a strange calm that comes after the storm. Not peace exactly, but a kind of quiet awareness. It's like standing in the ruins of your old self and realizing that, somehow, you're still here. You've faced the darkness, survived its weight, and now you're seeing the world differently. The fear hasn't vanished, but it no longer owns you. You start to understand that the point was never to conquer the shadow, but to learn its language. You begin to see that everything it ever showed you, the pain, the anger, the envy, wasn't a curse, but a message. The anger taught you where your boundaries were. The envy revealed what your heart secretly longed for. The sadness showed you where you'd been pretending to be strong. None of it was against you. It was all for you. The shadow was never the villain. It was the part of you that refused to die no matter how much you ignored it. I started noticing small changes first. When someone triggered me, I didn't immediately defend myself. I paused. I listened. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with them?" I asked, "What's being mirrored back to me right now?" And just like that, what used to feel like conflict started turning into clarity. The world, once hostile, began to look like a map. Every challenge, every irritation, every heartbreak pointing to something in me that wanted to be understood. That's the magic of awareness. You stop living reactively and start living consciously. You notice when you're about to repeat an old pattern, choosing the same kind of relationship, avoiding the same risk, using the same excuses, and instead of blindly following it, you stop. You take a breath. You realize you have a choice. That single pause, that heartbeat of awareness, is where freedom begins. It's humbling too. You start forgiving people more easily because you see that everyone is at war with their own shadow. The angry man isn't cruel. He's terrified of being powerless. The cold woman isn't heartless. She's afraid of being hurt again. The manipulative friend isn't evil. They're desperate not to be abandoned. When you see this, something inside you softens. Judgment fades. Compassion grows in its place. But don't mistake compassion for weakness. Seeing your shadow and the shadows of others gives you strength, not fragility. You stop trying to please everyone. You stop apologizing for existing. You begin to honor your instincts, your needs, your limits. Integration doesn't make you passive. It makes you real. You stop living from guilt and start living from truth. And then something beautiful happens. The same energy that once caused chaos inside you becomes the force that rebuilds you. The suppressed anger becomes assertiveness. The fear becomes discernment. The grief becomes empathy. It's like finding hidden treasures in the places you were once too afraid to look. The parts of you that felt broken begin to work together, not against each other. I think this is what it means to live with integrity. Not moral perfection, but inner alignment. You're no longer divided. You don't need to hide one side to protect the other. You can say yes when you mean yes and no when you mean no. You can walk into any situation without betraying yourself. That's the quiet confidence that comes from integration. The kind that doesn't shout, doesn't prove, just is. And yet, it's an ongoing process. Some days the old patterns resurface. Some days the shadow still whispers. But instead of fearing it, you listen. You thank it for reminding you where you're still asleep. You bring it closer instead of pushing it away. That's how you stay awake, not by defeating the darkness once and for all, but by learning to walk with it, hand in hand, through every changing season of your life. This is the beginning of wholeness, when you realize that what once felt like your prison was really your path. Something shifts quietly, almost imperceptibly. You wake up one morning and realize you don't feel the same weight pressing on your chest. The fear is still there, but softer, almost like an old friend who stopped shouting and started whispering. You look around at your life. The people, the routines, the choices, and everything feels both familiar and strangely new. It's not that the world has changed, it's that you have. There's a moment when you realize that integration isn't about fixing yourself. It's about accepting that you were never broken. You stop trying to become someone better and start becoming someone truer. You begin to live with a quiet honesty that doesn't demand attention. You're no longer obsessed with being right, or good, or perfect. You just want to be real. That's what freedom feels like. Not the absence of fear, but the absence of pretense. I think that's the real awakening, when you stop chasing the light and start seeing that it was always there, even in the dark. You realize that your pain, your mistakes, your contradictions, all of it was sacred. Every misstep brought you closer to yourself. Every fall stripped away another layer of illusion. You start to see beauty where you once saw failure. You start forgiving yourself for not knowing better when you didn't. The people around you notice too, not because you've become louder or brighter, but because your presence feels different. You listen more. You react less. You don't take things as personally as you used to. When someone lashes out, you see the wound behind their words. When someone withdraws, you sense the fear hiding there. And without realizing it, you start giving people the one thing you spent years trying to find: permission to be human. It's strange, this new kind of peace. It's not constant, not dramatic. It's more like a steady hum beneath everything. Even when things go wrong, and they still do, something in you stays grounded. You can hold both the light and the dark without being torn apart by either. You no longer divide life into good and bad, success and failure, love and loss. You just let it be. And in that letting be, you find something like grace. You begin to understand that the shadow never really leaves. It walks beside you now, not as a threat, but as a guide. When you feel envy, it reminds you of what you still desire. When you feel anger, it points to where you've abandoned yourself. When you feel fear, it shows you the edges of your own expansion. Everything that once felt like an enemy becomes an invitation. You're no longer fighting life, you're in dialogue with it. And maybe that's what wholeness really means. Not a constant state of bliss, but an ongoing relationship with your own complexity. You stop waiting for the perfect moment to start living. You stop apologizing for being too much or not enough. You realize that being fully alive means feeling everything: the sorrow, the joy, the confusion, the clarity, and allowing it all to exist within you. Sometimes I catch myself thinking back to the person I used to be, the one who tried so hard to keep it all together, who lived in fear of being found out. And I just want to reach back through time and whisper, "You were never lost. You were just becoming." Because that's what this whole journey is, isn't it? A slow, beautiful becoming. You're not the same anymore, and you'll never be again. And that's the gift. The shadow didn't destroy you. It revealed you. It showed you that peace isn't something you chase. It's something you uncover piece by piece in the places you were once too afraid to look. And now, as you stand in this quiet space between who you were and who you're still becoming, you finally understand. The darkness was never trying to swallow you. It was trying to bring you home. There's a kind of silence that follows deep change, not emptiness, but fullness. The world doesn't look brighter exactly. It just feels more real. The noise inside you softens. You stop searching for answers and start listening instead. You realize that awakening isn't an explosion of light. It's the quiet merging of everything you used to keep apart. You still feel the shadow sometimes. It moves through you in small ways, a flicker of irritation, a whisper of doubt, an echo of fear. But now, instead of tightening against it, you breathe. You welcome it. You say, "I see you." And just like that, the energy shifts. What used to feel like chaos becomes information. What used to feel like shame becomes depth. You no longer divide yourself into good and bad, light and dark. You just are. I think this is what freedom truly means. Not to escape your shadow, but to live beside it in harmony. To know your own contradictions and no longer apologize for them. To understand that wholeness doesn't mean perfection, it means inclusion. Everything belongs. The fear that once paralyzed you is now the same energy that pushes you forward. The sadness you used to drown in now deepens your compassion. The anger that once scared you now fuels your truth. Sometimes I wonder if this is what Jung meant when he said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." Enlightenment isn't about becoming holy, it's about becoming honest. It's the courage to meet yourself without judgment again and again through every season of change. You start to see how many people are still at war with themselves, punishing their emotions, chasing approval, mistaking numbness for peace. You see their pain, and instead of feeling superior, you feel tenderness, because you've been there. You know how hard it is to wake up from a life that looks fine on the surface, but feels hollow inside. You know how lonely it is to realize that no one can save you but yourself. But there's hope in that loneliness, a kind of sacred solitude where transformation begins. You no longer fear being alone because you finally enjoy your own company. You can sit with your thoughts without drowning in them. You can feel sadness without collapsing. You can feel joy without clinging. You've learned to let every feeling move through you like wind, gentle, passing, real. And then one day, something subtle happens. You laugh, not the polite kind, but a genuine, unguarded laugh. And in that laugh is everything. The sorrow you've carried, the strength you've found, the love you've reclaimed. You realize you're not chasing happiness anymore. You're living it, moment by moment, in its simplest form, awareness. When I think back to how this began, all the denial, the projections, the endless running, I can't help but smile. It all led here. Every dark night was a doorway, every mistake, a map, every breakdown, a teacher. The shadow was never trying to trap you. It was trying to wake you. It was the part of you that refused to let you live half a life. And now, standing here, you finally see it clearly. The light you were searching for was never outside. It was flickering inside you all along, waiting for you to turn inward and remember.